Which second-year starting pitcher should you be targeting your fantasy baseball drafts? We've got all that and more on today's action-packed episode of Locked On Fantasy Baseball.
You are Locked On Fantasy Baseball, your daily fantasy baseball podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, fantasy baseball fanatics, and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Sports Network, your team every day. As always, we're your number one podcast, we're your number one source of fantasy baseball knowledge, and thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. I'm your host, Dominic Martino. You can find me on Twitter at DomMartinoFB. Here, as always, with my brother, my co-host, Matthew Nay. You could find him on Twitter at Matthew_Nay. If you're listening on a platform like Apple or Spotify that allows for 5-star ratings and reviews, we would truly appreciate it if you could do that for us. And if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't already, hit that little bell below. It subscribes to the channel and also gives you notification every time we drop a new episode. And lastly, but most importantly, guys, please join us on the Subtext platform. On the Subtext platform, you'll have direct access to myself and Matt for all of your fantasy baseball questions with keepers, dynasty, all that stuff this time of year. We have our tier-based rankings and much more. But guys, real quick, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started today. And as I teased at the top, guys, we're talking about year 2 starting pitchers and which ones you're going to need on your fantasy baseball teams this season. Matt, my brother, take it away from here, please, sir.
All right. I love this kind of episode for starters because you know what? It's fun talking about year 2 pitchers and what their potential possibly can be. So let's start off with one of the biggest names that, everybody, we were even saying to draft everywhere, Mr. Grayson Rodriguez. We all, knew what the talent was, coming into the bigs last year and what his minor league track record looks like. And you know what? To be honest, the start of the season really wasn't that hot. And honestly thought he was a bust at some point. But then once the second half kind of kicked in, he kind of really tore it up. So I'm going to read off both his first half and his second half numbers because it's a significant difference. The first half was 45 innings pitched. He had 56 strikeouts, which was the only highlight that you could even say was good of the first half, with a 7.35 ERA through about 10 starts with a whip of 1.74. That's ugly and atrocious. But in the second half, he figured it out. He turned around through 76 innings. He had 73 strikeouts, a 2.58 ERA with a 1.09 whip. Significant improvements. Quite honestly, like you look at August and September, they were ridiculous. They were sub 3 ERAs. And in July, it was right above 3 at 3.18. He really brought it home. I really am. I have my highest expectations for Grayson Rodriguez. He took a full step forward and did something that not a lot of people can do. Usually what happens is players come into the league, they are, not seen before, and they're not successful. I mean, they're successful and then the league adjusts and then they can't figure it out. Grayson Rodriguez did the exact opposite. He came in, was not looking good, made the adjustments and showed that, hey, he's a mature pitcher, and then dominated the league like he should, like he did in the minors. So this tells me for year 2, Grayson Rodriguez is going to take a step forward even further and be the elite arm I think he's going to be. Currently, I have Grayson Rodriguez as my 19th overall starting pitcher at the position.
Me too, sir. Me too.
I think that's a fair spot. And quite honestly, I might be moving him up as more and more as I look into him and the more I get excited about him. I just got to gauge my, hype and just keep sticking to the numbers. But I think he might be moving up to like my 17th or 18th pitcher as well, because Grayson Rodriguez really got me, hot and heavy over here.
Matt, I could tell that was a very nice little rant about him. We're on the same page though. We actually have him ranked at the same exact spot. By the way, if you're new here, Matt and I's rankings when we talk about them, they are based on 5x5 head-to-head category leagues. That is Matt and I's specialty. By the way, if you want access to those, once again, join us on Subtext. But Matt, well agreed. Grayson Rodriguez says great stuff. Big fastball, change up, which is a pitch that he throws the second most, is pretty good as well. You hit the nail on the head. That's really all I have to add. I'm drafting him everywhere I can get him as my number 2 starting pitcher. I think that's awesome. So let's just keep things pushing here. Let's move on to our next guy. Let's talk about Yuri Perez. I love Yuri Perez, another big baseball guy like Grayson, but he's even bigger than Grayson. Right now, Yuri Perez, a giant of a man. He is 6'7", but he's a skinny boy. He's actually 6'8", 220. Has great stuff as well. Big fastball, 98 miles an hour, big slider, mixes in a curve and a changeup every once in a while. I have Yuri Perez actually at my number 21 starting pitcher right now. I think him and Grayson kind of go hand in hand. They both pitch in great parks. Grayson's on a little bit better of a team, but Miami was a pretty strong team last year as well. I think you could take either of them as your number 2 starting pitcher. If I honestly, I have Grayson a smidge higher, but I'm not mad at you if you're a Yuri Perez guy, because they're both great, talented young pitchers, and I want pieces of them almost everywhere I can get it this year.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the thing is, like, when it comes to Yuri Grayson battle, it's really tough. Like, you know, Grayson was just a higher, graded prospect coming into the year, and that's pretty much where, I'll chalk it up to the real fantasy baseball experts, and I'll rank Grayson over how I do in my rankings as well. But it's not far off between, I think, as well, because I have Yuri at literally one spot behind him at 20.
Yeah, there
Uh,
you go.
Now, the thing about Yuri is he came in like a house on fire, had one bad month, and then course corrected. Like, Yuri Perez not only started off hot and then the league adjusted and then he adjusted back, shows me that this dude could also be somebody that can really take a step forward. The talent that was influxed into the league last year from pitching is kind of bananas. Like, a lot of these second year players, I have a lot of high hopes for. And it's really exciting time in fantasy baseball and in baseball in general, because last year it was bats. This year, the year 2022, it was bats. 23, it was arms. I can't wait to see what 24 brings. But yeah, Yuri Perez must draft. I pretty much won't be moving him up, but we'll see. Um, let's move on. Let's talk about Bobby Miller. Bobby Miller is an exciting player. We've talked about him a few times. Like, Bobby Miller, um, is somebody that is like pretty much like the league's favorite player. Not the league, the fantasy community's favorite player, and I understand why. I mean, he had a really nice, impressive start to his career with 124 innings pitched. He had 119 strikeouts. He had a 3.76 ERA with a 1.102 WHIP. And it's pretty exciting, especially since the fact that he's on the Dodgers. The thing is, his minor league career is the one thing that kind of throws me for a loop. You look at his minor league numbers, and he really never was like a low ERA dude, where he's had a 5.65 ERA, a 4.25 ERA in 23 and 22. And it kind of like makes me wonder, is this for real? He's a little bit more on the risky end of terms of top end pitchers in terms of, second year players. But, at the same time, he did do a good job in the bigs, and his second half again was much better than his first, with a 3.36 ERA versus a 4.5 in the first half, and through more innings too. Also, too, his August was fantastic, but then in September, as he was getting to his peaks of his innings pitched, he started to die off again and finish off that month with a 5.7. Sorry, I'm reading the wrong stat there. I was way off on that. Actually, it was a lot better. I apologize. Wrong page on there. Anyway, Bobby Miller just straight up I think is a little bit more riskier just based off of his minor league track record versus the other two. Ultimately, Bobby Miller is a great pick. It's not like I have him buried in my rankings either. Currently, as today, I have Bobby Miller obviously much lower, about 7 spots lower than I do Yuri Perez at 27. there's talks of him as your pitcher too. I would not feel comfortable walking away with as my pitcher too, just based off of his minor league track record versus the other two that are kind of just building off that and growing. Whereas this is the first time we're really seeing him do his thing and being successful in terms of the ERA category. But before I hand it off to Dom and we move on, we do have a sponsor for you. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, and there's still time to get in the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins or lose. The app is super easy to use with many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlay. Or if you're having trouble finding bet, go to Find a Bet in the new Explore tab and make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. The best way to find popular parlays and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet a touchdown. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, guys. And also, guys, Locked On has launched its first ever national 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here 24/7 covering top stories of today with local experts on Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national 24/7 streaming channel. Also, guys, we want to introduce you to our Locked On Fantasy Baseball Podcast's Diamond Club on Subtext. We talked about it on the top of the show as the ultimate fantasy baseball companion. Dive into this offseason with Dom and I as we provide our tiered-based rankings with over 100 outfielders and starting pitchers ranked. Prospect insights, sleeper breakouts and busts, personalized draft grades, and if you have burning questions, we've got the answers. As the season unfolds, rely on our dynamic content, get real-time alerts right to your phone, including waiver wire rankings, instant call-ups, injury reactions, and a whole lot more. Stay ahead of your fantasy league by joining the Diamond Club on Subtext, where your path to victory begins. Subscribe now and elevate your fantasy baseball experience. Whew. Wow. Okay.
That's
Dom,
a lot.
That is a lot. Nailed it. Only stumbled a little bit. But yeah,
You actually did great, brother. You actually did a very good job.
Well, thank you, sir. Please talk.
Yes. So I'll hop in with my my Bobby Miller take here that, since Matt finally has decided to let me talk here. Matt and I usually are pretty much on the same page about everybody. This is one guy we're kind of, differing on. I honestly think out of all of three guys we talked about, Grayson, Eury, and Bobby Miller, I think has the highest upside just because he has the best stuff. He has 4 pitches that are elite pitches. His fastball, his sinker, his curveball, his slider are all elite pitches. So I think with that arsenal, if he can learn how to tame it, you almost have like, a Shane McClanahan, Blake Snell situation where if that control really, comes into play as he gets a little bit older, Bobby Miller only going to be 25 next year. I think he could be the best of the bunch. I would be moving him up above Grayson and Yuri Perez, but the thing is the Dodgers are going with a 6-man rotation. If you haven't heard that yet, I think they're kind of prepping for Shohei next year because, if Shohei decides to, they let him pitch next year, they're going to have to go 6-man because he needs that extra day of rest. So I have Bobby Miller actually literally 1 spot behind Yuri at 22. I think between the 3 of them, honestly, it's going to be a toss-up. If I had to bet on one, it's Bobby Miller, but the other 2 are fantastic as well. Matt, I see you chomping at the bit. Get in there, brother.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you with everything about like him having more pitches in his arsenal and things like that. But the thing is you got to look at it where it may not be this year, and that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Oh yeah,
Not
true.
In terms of like dynasty wise, like his long-term projection could obviously be better, not only with the team that he's on, and his arsenal, but just based off of what he possibly can do in his upside. But the thing is, for this year alone, I think the other 2 are going to be way more successful and have the opportunity. And hopefully he doesn't get dodgered either, which is the other thing I'm worried about, being that not only are they going that 6-man rotation, but look what they did to Kenta Maeda and other pitchers where they only let them go so many innings into it. And then not only is he going to have limited impact because of the 6-man rotation, but if they don't let him go past 4 or 5 innings, then really what are we getting out of Bobby Miller and walking away with him as like a number 2 pitcher can really damage you down the stretch during fantasy seasons.
Oh yeah, fair enough, fair enough. But we got to keep things pushing here. Let's move into our next guy. Let's talk about Tanner Bibee, somebody that Matt and I both absolutely love. He a fantastic rookie season from Bibee, 2.98 ERA, with 25 starts, 142 innings pitched, 141 strikeouts, and a 117 whip. Walks were a tiny bit high, something he needs to work on. I think as a 24-year-old last year, 25-year-old this year, something Bibee can definitely figure out. Another guy that's just like right there with the rest of these guys. I have Bibee at 26. If you talk about those first three and Bibee isn't in that conversation, that the people you're having the conversation with, might need a speaking to, because Bibee is just as good. Big fastball, good slider, mixes in that changeup every once in a while, and the curveball. Mainly the fastball slider are his best pitches. But I think he's another guy that just could have a very, very strong sophomore season. Not mad if I'm getting him at my, pitcher 2 right now. I do have ADP over the last month pulled up. He's actually a bargain compared to the last 3 we talked about. The last 3 that we talked about are all going inside the top 90, where Tanner Bibee's coming off the board at pick 117. So I honestly think if you wait and you grab a guy like Bibee that you can get as pretty much your SP3 right now, I think that's a pretty solid deal.
No, absolutely. We all know how I feel about, if you've been listening over the last couple weeks, how I feel about Bibee. He's in strong consideration. I think I have him ranked pretty bullishly as well. If I'm really looking here, yeah, I have him at my 22nd pitcher. I kind of have all these guys kind of bunched together, but I think Bibee's upside is really great. It's funny, he wasn't my favorite coming into last season, but he's one of my favorites leaving that last season. And Bibee just has all the upside in the world. And it's funny, this next guy we're gonna talk about, same team, but I actually liked a whole lot better than Bibee, and I still do in a way, but I do have Bibee ranked much higher. That's Gavin Williams. Gavin Williams is one of those guys that just has such elite power, like blow you away power. And then on top of that, his stuff is pretty damn good as well. He just didn't show up fully last year. Like, the problem was he started off really slow and then started to figure it out as the season went on, because it was kind of ugly in the first, like his first couple of shots at big league talent through 24 innings pitched. He had a 4.01 ERA and had 19 strikeouts. And, he's known to be well over a K per 9 guy. In the second half, he really, kind of showed out. He had 57 innings pitched. He had 62 strikeouts. He had a 2.98 ERA. The whip was high, 1.32 ERA, which was the only real knock on him for that. And, I think we're going to see more of that. He kind of reminds me of like young Blake Snell, trying to strike everybody out and then, walking too many guys, or, giving up a little bit of a home run action. And, I feel like Gavin Williams can, pretty much skyrocket and bull all the way up. I'm talking cryptocurrency at this point, but we can have a full bull market on Gavin Williams in 25. But I think this year is going to be the cheapest you're going to be able to get him, because I swear it could be anywhere from Blake Snell to Shane Bieber in his prime, and it just could be absolutely electric with Gavin Williams.
Yeah, Matt, we kind of fall back in sync here with Gavin Williams. I love him. I love the upside. But I think this is where we kind of start moving. I don't want to say a different tier, because if you do, are on subtext with us, you have our tier-based rankings already. And you would know that I have Bibee and Gavin Williams in the same tier. But Gavin Williams is kind of where I start to get to the end of that tier of pitching. And I think the upside for next year specifically is higher for Bibee, Miller, and Eury, Grayson. And it's kind of reflected in their ADP so far, because once again, over the last month, I have NFBC ADP pulled up here. And Gavin Williams coming off the board at 166. So that's even a big drop down from where Bibee was coming off the board. So you can kind of see that drop off there. But, Gavin Williams has upside. If you can get him SP5, SP6, that's kind of where you're really going to, starting getting that return on value. He threw, those 81 innings last year. Guy you could see throw 160, maybe 170 potentially if he stays healthy. And I think it's like a 3.5 ERA with a lot of strikeouts and maybe like a 1.2 whip for Gavin Williams. That's where I'm at with him.
Yeah, and you know what, Dom, I love your take, and I don't mean to cut you off, but before we move on and we talk about all these other great names we have one last sponsor for you. All right. Take it away, sir. Why don't we move on to this next guy?
Yeah. Let's move on to our next guy here, and I love him. He had such a sneaky good year last year, and it's Mr. Brian Woo. You got to throw that Ric Flair on when you say his name, otherwise it just doesn't feel right, you know. But somebody who I think is going to be a good pick this year. Last year, Woo, age 23 season, 4.21 ERA, 18 starts, 87 innings, 93 strikeouts, a 1.20 WHIP. He dealt with injuries last year, and like I said, you know, it kind of the whole season value or whole season stats don't show the value that this guy could potentially have, right? So I want to talk about his first few starts here. Let's really break this thing down here with Woo. He had a run of it was 6 starts. His first 6 starts, Woo threw 32 innings, 39 strikeouts, a 2.20 ERA. Batters hit 177 against him. He looked fantastic. Then he was a little bit shaky. He got rocked on July 18th, which was his 8th start, his 7th start. Got rocked again after that, and then he kind of picked up a little bit and had 2 big blow-ups towards the end of the season. But those rest of those starts looked good, which is another 6-7 starts in there. So it's kind of a case where 4 bad starts make 10 really good starts look bad. So I think Brian Woo, where a guy who another guy who actually has good stuff. It's crazy all these guys coming up have to have just pretty good stuff, good fastball, good cutter there for Brian Woo. I think if he finds one more pitch that works for him, maybe that slider he could work on a little bit, throw it a little bit more, get hitters off balance. I think Brian Woo is going to be sneaky good. And before I pass it to Matt, I want to just see if I could find his ADP. Actually pick 190 right now. I think that's decent value for a guy you can get as one of your last starting pitchers.
Yeah. No, I mean, Woo is definitely an interesting one. I have him ranked a little bit later, like pitcher 50.
You might even have him higher than me. Damn.
Yeah. I look at Woo and it's like he's exciting.
57. I will.
Okay. He's exciting. He's just somebody I'd rather have deeper in drafts, and obviously you're not gonna have to pay that much for him, which is great. So ultimately, I mean, I think Dom covered him pretty great. And I actually want to talk about this last guy before I cut out earlier on you guys. And that's Ryan Pepiot. Ryan Pepiot, another guy that's honestly I like more now that he's left the Dodgers than I did when he was on the Dodgers. And the fact that he went over and got traded to Tampa, I think, is a massive upgrade because now we don't got to worry about a 6-man rotation. We don't got to worry about him getting dodgered. I love what Tampa Bay does to their pitchers as a whole. They just do things that I genuinely just enjoy. They turn guys like Zach Eflin, who I thought was, pretty much a dumpster dive of a pick, to a top 25 arm last year. So what they could do with a guy that has talent like Pepiot is, kind of limitless. So I'm pretty excited to see what he's going to do. He's more of a must draft pitcher for me than anybody else. I don't have his ADP off the rip here.
I do.
If
you like it. Pick 203 for Ryan Pepiot.
So I don't see as we get to draft season that he's going to be that high, but pick 203. Like that's like your pitcher 7. Like that makes me like drool at the mouth and salivate. So he's going to be a must draft because I swear this kid could seriously provide you some serious value in drafts.
I love Ryan Pepiot. I can't believe he's going after Brian Woo. That's crazy to me. I have him a lot closer to Gavin Williams. I have Ryan Pepiot as my 36th starting pitcher, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of high upside. Matt, you talked about Tampa Bay and what they do with starting pitchers. I don't see why they would have targeted Ryan Pepiot, who was already a good starting pitcher last year. With Pepiot, I really think he's just gonna take things to the next level next year. He good fastball, sits around 94 on average, though it mixes in a changeup and a slider. Once again, just Ryan Pepiot, 6'3", 215. heads over to a team that's great with starting pitching. I think Ryan Pepiot is going to be a must draft. I don't recall if Matt read you off the stats from that little sample size from last year in the bigs, but I will. 2.14 ERA. It was 3 starts, 8 games. He came out of the bullpen, 42 innings, 38 strikeouts, and a 0.76 WHIP. He really took that control to the next level. He really wasn't known for his control in the minors. He walked a lot of guys, but I really think if he can keep those gains in control, and I don't, see why he can't, especially with new eyes on him down there in Tampa, I think Ryan Pepiot is in for a very, very good sophomore season. Let's keep things pushing, though. My brother Matt had to step out on us. He had to go pick up his daughter. So it's just me rocking with you guys through the rest of this thing. But let's talk about Hunter Brown. I loved Hunter Brown. I was super high going into on Hunter Brown last year. I was kind of getting him almost in all of my leagues pretty late. The hype did start to build towards the end of draft season last year, but I fell in love with Ryan Pepiot, a guy who kind of got to come up, with Justin Verlander taking him under his wing. Pretty much had the same release as Verlander, which I absolutely loved, but kind of, just didn't really perform the way we expected him to. We had a 5.09 ERA, 29 starts, 155 innings, 178 Ks, and a 1.36 WHIP. Hunter Brown's still only going to be 25. I'm still in on Hunter Brown if we can get him at a pretty good price. He's coming off the board at pick 191. I do like him there, but when I see Pepiot at 203 and I see Savale at 211, I don't know if I'm taking Hunter Brown there. If he starts to fall a little bit and you can get him as like your last starting pitcher, I might be buying in there. If he looks good in spring training, if he's made a change, something to him that takes him to another level, then maybe I'm buying back in. He did have Hunter Brown did have a strong 2022 in the minors in AAA, 2.55 ERA, 14 starts, 106 innings, 134 strikeouts with a 1.08 WHIP. So he did have that prospect pedigree coming up into the bigs, and showed it off again in in 2022 in the bigs when he got the call. 0.89 ERA, 2 starts, seven games all overall, 20 innings, 22 strikeouts, and he had a 1.08 WHIP. So Hunter Brown is somebody that I'm not going out of my way to target, but if he falls to me and I need a starting pitcher with upside, I wouldn't mind getting in on Hunter Brown. Let's keep things pushing here. Let's move on to another guy that kind of had a volatile 2023, and it's Taj Bradley. Now, I love Taj Bradley. I actually, Matt and I did a first year startup league last year, dynasty style league with, minor league players and everything. And I took Taj Bradley. And I was loving every second of it. He looked pretty good when he got the call initially, but then he started to falter and, got sent down when they really didn't have to send him down. They kind of just did it, because he was young. He was actually, off to a pretty, good start. And then he got called back up and really was never the same. Overall, it was a 5.59 ERA for Taj Bradley, 21 starts, 104 innings, 129 strikeouts, and a 1.38 WHIP. Now, Taj Bradley is a guy who really has good stuff. And I think if he could just hone it and pull everything together, almost in the sense of like a Hunter Green type guy, if they got everything together, could potentially be top 10 type starting pitchers. But we'll see where things go with Taj Bradley. I'm pulling up his ADP here. I'm not sure where he's going off the board. He's actually going off the board at pick 264. Now that's super reasonable for a guy that has big upside. 6'2", 190. All of these guys we talked about today so far, absolute giants. But Taj Bradley averages about 96 on that fastball. Has a pretty good cutter. Mixes in a curve and a changeup. He just really needs to get everything under control, do a little bit of fine tuning, set that fastball up, and he'd be an elite starting pitcher. So, at the end of drafts, somebody that does, once again, have high upside, not necessarily targeting him, but I do think Taj Bradley could, take a step in the right direction going into his age 23 season. Let's move on to our last guy of the day, and it's Brandon Pfaadt. Now, Brandon Pfaadt actually did the opposite of a Taj Bradley, kind of came up with stinking a bit, But then in the playoffs, guy just kind of figured things out, and he got that exposure on, the big stage. So a name that might be moving up in some of your drafts. Once again, scrolling through ADP here to find where Brandon Pfaadt's been coming off the board the last month. I'm assuming, 214, right around the Savales and the Pepiots, and we got, Brian Bayo over here, Lucas Giolito. Shout out to my buddy Jonathan. We go back and forth about Lucas Giolito. I got to give you guys one of my classic Lucas Giolito rants at some point, but it's not going to be today as I'm talking about Brandon Pfaadt. Once again, another giant, 6'4", 220. I think he has upside. Probably the last name. Obviously, this reason last name on this list. But if everybody else is gone on this list and you want somebody that could potentially be on a good team, get you some wins, strikeouts. Not sure about much else. I think you could target Brandon Pfaadt. But guys, that's all for today. Please be sure to like, subscribe, comment, rate, and review. But guys, until next time, see ya.